Today I'm reviewing The Voyeurs by Gabrielle Bell, 2012 real-time comic memoir. It's collected from her series Lucky, which is, I guess, it's a selection of her comics over 4 years from 2007 to 2010, which basically talks about her as the main character in this book of from her home in Brooklyn, with trips to Tokyo, Paris, and the south of France with her boyfriend collaborator Michel Gondry, and then also just as a guest at the San Diego Comic Con, where she is an indie artist, is very far removed from the comic book hero things. I say indie artists because that's basically. I mean, there are indie artists who do superhero comics, but this is very much your text heavy, slightly, I guess, crudely drawn, stylistically drawn. I think it's more on the crudely drawn, which is no hit. I mean, someone like um, um, Art Spiegelman used the same style for something like Mouse, and stuff like that. So very much it's a firm tradition in the kind of underground indie comic scene. So yeah, that's the style. It's very much your kind of very straight kind of a grid comics. She probably sticks much more to the grid, at least in this. It seems to be, I don't know if it's web comics or something like that, but it's very much more just your grid thing, and she doesn't really break out of that or do anything else, which is fine because I mean this is it's very much people talking comics where there's it's very text heavy of her having conversations with Goundry, her boyfriend, or other friends or stuff like that, and it's very these are it's the wordy, she's like prototypical wordy neurotic Brooklynite, not originally from Brooklyn, but that milieu of I'm an intellectual and I'm going to overthink things and I'm going to get really stressed out about stuff and I'm going to curl up in a ball, which, hey, you could do that in Victoria too. Welcome to it. But very much, this is the center of stuff like that because this is the center of the publishing industry and stuff like that. Oh, one of these things that, one of the things at the front of the book, it's got a blurb, a master of the exquisite detail from Francois Mouly, art director, art editor of the New Yorker. So the probably the primo market for buying stuff like this. And funnily enough, not as a main character, but Francois actually shows up in the book depicted. I think she's interviewing Crumb, another the big dude in underground comics. But yeah, it's one of these things of you. She doesn't make a deal of it because she's of course at the center of the thing. But this is very much I'm a Brooklynite and I know all the people. And even though I'm sure it doesn't feel like that to herself as I'm an insider or anything like that, very much as someone in the boonies away from the center of the universe, it very much feels that way. So I think with this book, it's what your tolerance level is going to be for New Yorkers who are fascinated with themselves, because this is what the book is about. And I have to say I found a lot of the things of when she was actually, it's funnily enough, it's when she's not inside her head, it's when she's having arguments with her boyfriend, or she's having all these discussions I actually I with other people in her life, or she's dealing with, oh, I'm having to travel to Tokyo or Paris or the south of France. I found that less easy to get into, and I have to say my first run through the book, I was sort of apt to sort of dismiss this book and just sort of set it aside. If I hadn't been doing a review on it, I think I don't know if I would have gone any deeper with it. Which is, I have to say, is the value of doing, I found, of doing kind of reviews like this on BookTube, because hey, I kind of went back and, well, what things did I actually enjoy? And I did actually find a lot of things in here I did enjoy on reflection, which didn't immediately come to mind. It was interesting. It's very much a lot of the kind of more interior moments that are interspersed throughout her more frantic, wordy kind of sections that actually more touched me. There's stuff about her and being in the south of France and just going off on her own and drawing, like being on the side of the road, or being in the woods and thinking back to her childhood. or she's in Brooklyn and she's sitting in the dark waiting for the super to come to help her with the power's gone out in her thing. And just these kind of alone, quiet moments, I went, oh, actually, those are moments that um, I think I could see her using her art to a much better effect than a lot of the more uh, bubbles full of dialogue. I think at the beginning, it's just one of these things of just like, I don't know. It's one of these things of everybody's talking to each other in large, full bubbles, and this is probably an old person complaint. I know it's an old person complaint, but I really had to read this under really good light because it's all the text is very, very tiny, 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 tiny little text, which you know, that probably didn't help my enjoyment of them blathering on, because then I had to like, oh shit, I have to get the light so I can actually read what the hell's going on. And I mean, what they're having to say is like can be some interesting things, but it got a bit tiresome, and I found those interior moments much more compelling. I also found it actually more interesting when she actually got out of her own biography, which frankly, she's a cartoonist in Brooklyn, and and she's schlepping around to hotels and stuff like that. It's like it wasn't that interesting. When she started getting into, she has this fictional thing of like, oh, I'm going to write the Scum Manifesto, and suddenly the blogosphere is alight with the fact that Gabrielle Bell is going to adapt the Scum Manifesto by Valerie Solanas, who shot Andy Warhol, and it's like, and she kind of goes into all this kind of more and more detail about it, and actually kind of also giving you some of the Scum Manifesto and stuff like that, and that was stuff that was like, oh, that caught me. That was like really interesting stuff. And she's talking to her mom about it, and her mom's got all these crazy stories about Valerie Solanas and what she was like in the '60s and stuff like that. And that was all really cool and interesting. And it was because it got out of her head and it got into this weird kind of fantastical telling of the Scum Manifesto and Valerie Solanas and her mother, which of course she's got this in-joke in here of, oh, every time I mention my mother in one of my comics, I get into it's America's best comics of that year or whatever. I can't remember what the thing was. And if you look at the front of the book, yes, most of these sections appeared in her Lucky, but yes, page 105 through 111 appeared in Hotland Mifflin's Harcourt's Best American Comics 2011, which is, of course, the section that includes her mom. So her mom continues to be her lucky charm and gets her into the Best American Comics. So good job, mom. Even if it's a highly fictionalized, wow, crazy mom. I don't know how fictionalized. Maybe it is. It's one of those things that it's like, oh, I think I'd probably want to go back, and I think she's written a memoir about her and her mother, which actually probably sounds like it would be a lot more interesting than this, which the Voyeurs, which is much more. It's a diary, and it's, oh yes, it kind of gives you bits of her life and stuff like that, but like most people's lives, even in selections, it's not that interesting, and so there's a little hunk in there that is really interesting, but overall this has given me a taste of Gabrielle Bell, but I have a feeling it's not the best taste of Gabrielle Bell, and I'll hopefully find better stuff to start off to continue with. Oh, at the very beginning of this book, I just want to I think it's a case of an artist trying too hard, because this book is called The Voyeurs, and indeed the first thing is The Voyeurs, and it's it's one of those things of, oh, you live in Brooklyn, you have your parties on the roof, because at least in my Hicksville thing, that's what Brooklynites are doing all the time, is they're having parties on their roof. And she comes up onto the roof, and all her house guests are looking across the way at a couple having sex with their window open, and they're all just staring there, standing, and it's like, you're looking across at the building, and it's got all these grid windows, just like the grids of the comic book itself, which is like, are we being voyeurs for looking in on Gabrielle Bell's life? Are we are the voyeurs? And it's like, and what is she that she doesn't draw the curtains shut? Does that make her the exhibitionist? And it's like, oh, how very metaphorical. Sorry, but To me, that was like the artist trying too hard and trying to bundle up her. Here's me showing, for some reason, having that compulsion to show off my life. So yeah, that's basically, that was my thoughts on that. So overall, an interesting book. Something I'm glad I picked up at the library, and I'll look out for more of her work. But yeah, it's probably not the place for people to start overall if they want to get super. It's not. I wouldn't recommend it as a place to start. That said, I'll have to investigate her more and find out where it is. More videos later.